So I have I don't know if it's enviable or unenviable task of reminding you why you're all here. And it's not necessarily going to be what you're expecting. At O'Reilly, our company mission we describe as changing the world by spreading the knowledge of innovators. And that's what we're really thinking about with Web 2.0. We're in the middle of an enormous change. We are making a change in the world. And I want to talk about some elements of that change today and hopefully get you guys focused on what really matters. Because, of course, if you've been following the headlines, which we've been kind of whipsawed lately. Back in January, we saw J.P. Morgan predicts 2008 will be nothing but net. But within a couple of months, we had the economic downturn. It's like, oh my God, clouds loom over tech sector. We had a story called "Is Venture Capital's Affair with Web 2.0 Over?" And then there was the whole brouhaha between ComScore and Google. And we saw, then of course Google tops their profit target, and the market jumps back. And boy, I'll tell you, if you're following the headlines, you might as well stay home because you'll be very terminally confused. You have to think about what really matters. What are the deep trends that are driving Web 2.0? And that story that talked about, maybe venture capital was the best. I was curious there at how they define Web 2.0. They said, we've adopted a strict methodology for categorizing Web 2.0 companies. They have a business model that revolves around dynamic interface facilitating participation. Okay, so far. Then applications include podcasting, tagging, blogs, social networking, mashups, and wikis. I go, that's all certainly part of Web 2.0, but I don't really think it's the core. I mean, for example, Google would be excluded by their definition, and that doesn't make sense to me. So when I think about Web 2.0, I think about some deep trends. The first one is that the internet really is becoming the platform, a global platform for everything connected. Right? And the nature of that platform is it's this amazing tool for harnessing collective intelligence. It's not just about participation. It's about literally, we are building a platform to make the world smarter, right? To make businesses smarter, to make ourselves smarter. This is an amazing revolution in human augmentation. We're at a turning point, this akin to literacy or the formation of cities. This is a huge change in the way the world works. And as part of that, there are new rules about where businesses get value. I've used the phrase data is the intel inside because it's not just about software anymore. There's also, when it is software, it's actually about software that doesn't just reside on a single device like our desktop computer. It's really above the level of a single device. Software delivered as a service rather than an artifact. Big change in the computer industry. So these are not short-term trends. So I just want to ask you, do you really think we're done yet with these trends and where they're taking us? I don't. I think we have a long way to go and a lot to discover. And so I want to talk about three particular areas of opportunity that I see right now. One is Web 2.0 in the enterprise. Up till now, a lot of the Web 2.0 activity has been on the consumer internet. But I think enterprises really are starting to understand that Web 2.0 is about turning themselves inside out, becoming network citizens, opening themselves to the world in new ways. Secondly, Web 2.0 is evolving into cloud computing, which is really where the web as platform becomes the reality for businesses and individuals in new ways. And finally, the web as a artifact of the PC is going away. Mobile phones and ubiquitous sensors are completely changing the way we interact with computers. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those opportunities. So, Web 2.0 in the enterprise. Now, when a lot of people think about this, they might think about something like Dell IdeaStorm. Fabulous site that lets Dell interact with its customers, get information from them about ideas for products, feedback. And this is, in fact, a big part of companies learning the social web. And I do believe in this. In fact, O'Reilly today just announced O'Reilly in Practice, which is our training and consulting division working with enterprises on Web 2.0 and social web type activity. But the real heart of Web 2.0, you have to remember, is collective intelligence, which I've defined as harnessing network effects to build applications that get better the more people use them. Now, that's certainly true about something like Dell IdeaStorm, but it doesn't really get to the heart of the enterprise. And I want to give you an example of how this works. When you think about turning 1.0 into 2.0, I compare, for example, a Web2.0 company like Google to a large bank. Right? Both of them have massive data centers, right? They both get data from customers. They actually sell services. They don't sell products, right? The data gets better all the time through constant interaction with the service. The companies do data mining of the customer behavior. But only one of them does real-time user-facing services based on the data. You know, your bank has so much data that they don't give you, whereas Google is all about giving you services against their data. So let me give you an example of this, a banking example through, actually, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself on the slides. The key piece of this is actually about finding meaning in that data that you've got, but then turning it into user-facing services. So this is why I actually define Google PageRank as sort of the beginning of the Web 2.0 era. It was the realization that there was meaning hidden in links. You know, that a link was a vote. And that was where Google had this breakthrough in search. So there's all kinds of other areas in the enterprise where there's hidden meaning in enterprise data. And right now, companies try to mine that data in their back office, but they don't give it to us. So sometimes startups turn around and say, well, we're going to liberate that data. Many of you perhaps are in that business. Well, there's one company I wanted to highlight today, a company called Wasabi. I'm an investor and a board member, so I want to disclose that. This is a personal finance application on the web. Here you have a view of somebody's account, their spending. But Wasabi, like Google with PageRank, realized that how people spend their money is a vote. And if you look at the middle of the screen, you'll see that this particular person spent, I can't quite read it, $964 or something like that at Weatherford BMW. Big BMW place over on, near the entrance to the Bay Bridge over in Berkeley. It's sort of a landmark in Berkeley, a big dealership. But Wasabi, by aggregating the collective intelligence that people are sharing from their bank account data, is able to make recommendations. And on that link, they introduced a new feature today called merchant pages. And the merchant pages give people collective intelligence about spending. And what they discovered in the data was that people who go to Weatherford BMW versus this little hole in the wall called Bavarian Pro, which is also in Berkeley, spend twice as much. But only 17% of them recommend it. Only 15% of them come back regularly, right? Versus Bavarian Pro, half the price, 96% recommend it. But Bavarian Pro doesn't have any marketing, so they're a little hole in the wall. The other place is a big deal. So there's this new opportunity for a bank, for example, to say, wow, we can make this useful data available to our customers. So what Wasabi did was they said, well, the bank's not doing it, we can do it. And they're focused relentlessly on this idealistic vision of, let's make this data more useful to our customers. Right? And I think that is a lot of what Enterprise 2.0 is about. It's letting users into your back office and then turning your company inside out so they can be part of all that data that you have. You know, if you don't, well, you can wait for an innovative startup to do it for you. And so if you're out there in the business of looking for opportunities, think about ways to help enterprises serve their customers better, make their customers smarter, more capable. On the next topic, cloud computing. You guys obviously have been hearing about this a lot, but I actually want to use a fabulous quote from one of our speakers later tonight, Clay Shirky, at our predecessor to this conference, our P2P and Web Services conference back in 2001, which was entitled Building the Internet Operating System. Clay had this great story. He said, Thomas Watson at IBM once said he saw no need for more than 5 computers worldwide. We now know that he was wrong. Everybody laughed because they thought of the hundreds of millions of PCs. And then the punchline, he overstated the number by 4. Right? That's the world we're heading into. Right? What we used to think of as a computer is really just a device connected to the global computer. You know, you guys know that. When you don't have Wi-Fi, you go, man, this is a piece of junk, let me throw it away. Right? When you can't get cell phone coverage, it's a piece of junk. Right? If you're not connected to the cloud, it doesn't really matter. And that's really where we're headed. The computer is every computer. What we used to call a computer is just a device attached to the single global computer. And so thinking about that, of course, Amazon is a great example of a company that got ahead of the curve. They started offering infrastructure services on that global computer, where they really are taking seriously the idea of the internet as operating system, and, for example, offering storage and processing at an amazingly affordable price and with a great business model. And there's, of course, an ecosystem growing up around Amazon Web Services here. So companies like RightScale or Heroku, which are basically development front ends that allow people to manage these cloud computing applications. There's a lot of opportunity in building the infrastructure in which we really start treating the internet as an operating system. And of course, Google has gotten into the game. We're going to be hearing more about Google App Engine at the conference here. There are also startups that are going head-on with these guys. A company called Engineer that's doing their own hosting of applications and very sort of powerful web operations tools. So I think great opportunity there. But there's something to worry about in this move to the internet as platform. And it was crystallized in a really nice way the other day by Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures, VC in New York. And in his blog the other day, he did a post called "The Difference Between WordPress and Facebook." And the entry goes on, is about $14.8 billion, according to the publicly available information about the most recent financings. You know, $15 billion for Facebook, $200 million for Automatic. But then he compares the ComScore growth trends. He says, my God, you know, WordPress isn't that far behind Facebook in growth, in the number of page views. What's the difference? And the difference is that the industry, the market, values consolidation. It values centralization over decentralization to the tune, in this particular case, of $14.8 billion. And the fact that the market values centralization is part of a trend that we need to be aware of. Because where that's going to lead us is back to the world that, you know, we thought we were getting out of with Microsoft. Because if we end up with large centralized players who start to gobble each other up, we maybe end up with too few players and we start losing the freedom and innovation that we've had so far. So we need to watch that. And it's a big part of Web 2.0 that we have to be aware of and worry about. The collective intelligence and this data as Intel Inside idea are joined at the hip, because every true Web 2.0 company is actually building a database whose value grows in proportion to the number of participants. And there's a race, basically, to grow that database, because bigger is better. You know, you think about this. You know, Google is better than the competitors. eBay is better than the competitors. Amazon is better than its competitors, because getting all the things in one place is really helpful. And so that gives you accelerating returns to the winners. And that's a kind of paradox in Web 2.0, that applications that are built on open, decentralized network actually lead to new concentrations of power. Unless we think about how to build interoperability into the next layer. So right now this is happening a lot in this area of the social graph, where people are starting to say, how do we keep that open? We have to think about that hard. So that's why things like programmable web really matter, thinking about the web as platform and as an open platform. And it's why we have open and interoperability as a theme. Tomorrow morning's keynotes are all going to be about openness. Okay, moving on. I'm really running behind here. I've got to talk about mobile a little bit. When many of you think about mobile on the web, you're probably thinking about, wow, you know, things like the iPhone, fabulous internet device. But I want you to think again about this Web 2.0 mantra that I've used for many years, which is software above the level of a single device. That's the heart of what you have to think about. We're moving to a world where software that is on a single device is less useful than software that's connected, that lives in the cloud. So you need to realize that mobile does not equal the phone. Right? Great example, Microsoft just introduced this live mesh product, synchronization in the cloud for a range of devices. That's starting to be in an interesting direction, although I noticed that it supports Windows devices only. They don't really get it. But they'll hopefully talk about that some more, about why they do get it, and hopefully they'll be opening up. But also think about new kinds of display surfaces. If you guys watch the election night coverage, you see the Jeff Hahn's Perceptive Pixel, large screen, touch screen displays. This is the iPhone writ large. New interaction paradigms, where we literally are dealing with new kinds of display surfaces, new ways of interacting with computers that are backed by large databases. Or here's a crowd, a small crowd to be sure, playing a game against a public screen using their cell phone as a controller, a startup called Megaphone. Interesting how you start to think about the phone as part of an ecosystem. And this is even more interesting, the Dash. You guys have heard about the Dash, the internet-connected GPS that does sort of crowdsourcing of traffic data. Well, what's really interesting is the Dash is actually built on the OpenMoko Linux-based open-source cell phone platform. It's like they figured out how to turn the cell phone into a GPS. Very cool. Microsoft also just recently introduced this feature called ClearFlow, which is traffic analysis. And talking with Eric Horvitz, the Microsoft researcher behind some of the ideas in ClearFlow, really fascinating. They're talking about sensors everywhere, and how do you get data from those sensors? Do you want to actually track data from every GPS all the time? No, he says, no, we have to have a dispatch layer, back to the Internet operating system, so we can say, hey, we need some data from that on-ramp right now. And maybe you have a social contract with your customers that says, we'll get data a few times a month. But then you have a dispatch layer to collect the data just what you need when you need it, so that you can say, yeah, the on-ramp's congested now, or this back street is congested. Another cool application that came out recently, something called the Quake Catcher Network. This is basically a distributed computation application that uses the motion sensors in your laptop. So like if you have a Mac laptop, it's got a little motion sensor in there, and it uses it to report in any earthquake activity. So we're all being asked to contribute our sensors. Fascinating. Similarly, there was a recent article in Slashdot about the fact that every car is now required to have tire pressure monitors, and those tire pressure monitors actually carry additional data, and you can do all kinds of other hacking and monitoring of the data based on this sensor that's in the car. And there's actually 30 or 40 or 50 sensors in every car. So where's that taking us? I think it's taking us to a world that I'm calling ambient computing. We're moving out of the world in which people typing on keyboards will drive collective intelligence applications, and instead they're going to be driven by stuff. And that's going to be part of this whole ambient computing era where we're just in a supercomputing. And Web2.0 isn't something we interact with on a laptop, it's something that's all around us. Well, one more thing. I said I'd talk about three things. I'm stealing a page from Steve Jobs. I give you one more thing. Visionary companies are not afraid to make bold commitments to big, hairy, audacious goals. That was a statement made in a fabulous book about business called Built to Last. If you guys haven't read it, I recommend it highly. So I want to remind you, you guys have probably seen this picture floating around on the net. When you have invested, Microsoft Corporation, 1978, a bunch of nerdy geeks, right? And but they had this amazing big vision, a PC on every desk and in every home. And at the time, the titans of industry at the time said, the PC is just a toy. Right? We're in a world where people are dismissing a lot of the stuff. Oh yeah, this is just consumer internet stuff. It doesn't really matter for us. Sorry about that, I should have brought some water. Okay, how about this? In 1998, when Google was started, search had largely been written off as a business opportunity. These guys said, no, we think there's something there. They had a big, hairy, audacious goal. We're going to organize all the world's information. So I want to ask you guys a question. Do you think we're really done yet? No. Right, there's so much to do. I mean, this is this amazing confluence of technology and opportunity, a time when we really can change the world. And there's some big problems that need to be solved. And that's where I want to kind of leave you with. You guys know, if you've ever done any hiking, you get to the top of one mountain, and there's usually another bigger one beyond. And so I'm going to throw out some big goals that right now don't necessarily have big money associated with them, but are really important. So you look, for example, Larry Lessig recently introduced ChangeCongress.org, trying to figure out how do you make our government more responsive, less the prey to special interests. And there's all these interesting startups. Sunlight Foundation has OpenMarkup.org, where they're trying to get the process of changing of bills visible to the public. Right? You have things like EveryBlock. We're trying to get all of the information out of our government made available to all us as citizens. This is a huge goal, to try to make government responsive to us, the citizens. How fantastic. And I don't know if there's money there, but damn, it's important. Right? Now look at something like Instead. This is this global monitoring system for infectious disease outbreaks. Really amazingly cool. Important. Read in the New York Times the other day about people tracking illegal deforestation in Brazil. It's this small team of park rangers trying to cover millions and millions of square miles, and they're using Google Earth to help them do it. These tools really can make a difference on big problems. So it was Earth Day yesterday. I mean, how many people here noticed that? I mean, there's some real issues here we're facing. I don't know whether you accept the premise of an inconvenient truth, but I have to say, if they're wrong, so be it. But I'd sure rather bet on making the changes that we need to make than just kind of stick my head in the sand. My future son-in-law has an alternative energy company. We also did a presentation recently, which he put up at a site called whatson.org, about how we use our energy. And of course did some variation of all the terrible things that potentially could happen to us in the future of high carbon. And the downsides are enormous. They're enormous. 30–40% of species lost. Cities underwater. If we're wrong and we make investments in these big problems, we'll actually have invented really cool new technology. That's not a terrible outcome. If we're wrong and we've done nothing, we really have disaster ahead of us. And so I just want to remind you and urge you to not follow the headlines, to not just say, what's the latest hot thing, but to think about and to go after big, hard problems. And I want to finish, actually here's another one, food riots, are in the articles. There's big problems coming. And there's a poem, and I actually realized I screwed up, because normally I have my laptop on the podium, and my eyes are not sharp enough to read it, so I'm going to have to jump down here so I can read it. This is a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, which I actually recited to my father on his deathbed 25 years ago, something that's sort of part of my core belief system, and I want to share it with you. And it's really about this idea of tackling hard problems. It's called The Man Watching. He says, I can tell by the way the trees beat after so many dull days on my worried window panes that a storm is coming. The storm, the shifter of shapes, drives on across the woods and across time, and the world looks as if it had no age. The landscape, like a line in the psalm book, is seriousness and weight and eternity. Now, this is the part I love. What we choose to fight is so tiny. What fights us is so great. If only we would let ourselves be dominated as things do by some immense storm, we would become strong too and not need names. When we win, it's with small things, and the triumph itself makes us small. What is extraordinary and eternal does not want to be bent by us. I mean, the angel who appeared to the wrestlers of the Old Testament, when the wrestlers' sinews grew long like metal strings, he felt them under his fingers like chords of deep music. Whoever was beaten by this angel, who often simply declined the fight, went away proud and strengthened and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. So here's a picture by Delacroix of Jacob wrestling with the angel. It appears in the Cathedral of Saint-Sulpice in Paris. That's the image I want to leave with you. I want you to think about wrestling with the angel, tackling big, hard problems. And if you win or if you lose, make a difference. Make a difference. Thank you very much.